Can you imagine sign a 7-time world champion and finish the Grand Prix outside the points, in the circuit where you have won the most times? And that your partner defends it by saying that it was something isolated? Today we are going to unravel what really happened with Hamilton in Hungary, and if Leclerc is right when defending him. Charles Leclerc soon went out after the debacle lived by Ferrari in Hungary, a race that left deep scars on Maranello's team. His statements were concise, almost protective. Lewis was an isolated case. In other words, a bad day, an anomaly, an error in the system. But when scratching under the surface, which seems a support phrase between colleagues, reveals a much densest layer of technical tensions, contained emotions and a structure that threatens to fracture from within. The classification was already the first indication of a worrying internal unbalance. While Leclerc brought the maximum of a refined SF25 for the slow curves of the Hungarian layout and stayed with the pole, Hamilton did not even manage to go to the Q3. He was eliminated in Q2 with the 12th best, visibly frustrated, overwhelmed, throwing a phrase that resonated as a rumble in the paddock: Ferrari should change pilot. A statement that many interpreted as a message towards the direction of the team, but also as a possible emotional slip, revealing of the weight that he is carrying on his shoulders in this new stage of his career. The press was divided: provocation, self-criticism, or aid cry. Already in the race, the contrasts were accentuated. Leclerc led half of the competition with authority, and everything pointed to a possible solid victory that would have sealed the resurgence of Ferrari before the summer break. But on Vuelta 40, the Monegasco car began to lose pace in an alarming way. Up to 2 seconds per lap, a sudden and inexplicable collapse. At the end of the race in 4th place, with 42 seconds of difference with respect to the leader, the engineers still did not know if they had suffered a structural breakage of the chassis or if the fault was of a hurried strategic decision to raise the pressure of the tires to avoid an illegal wear of the bottom of the car, as suspected George Russell. Today that question is still unanswered. Hamilton, meanwhile, was completely out of the competitive map. Locked in traffic, penalized by an erratic strategy that began with hard tires, was exceeded even by Verstappen in Curve 4, in a maneuver in which the Dutch surpassed him by the grass. It was his first Hungary Grand Prix without adding points, something almost unthinkable for a pilot who has won 8 times. The contrast to its history in this circuit not only hurts for the symbolic, but for what it implies. A Ferrari who, even in one of his most favorable paths, has failed to give him a competitive platform. And worse, a team that fails to adapt to its piloting style, which has triggered all the alarms inside Maranello. Leclerc, in that context, assumed a role that went beyond the solidarity partner. His public defense of Hamilton, far from being a media courtesy, was a surgical maneuver to contain internal damage. He knows that the team cannot afford to lose their new star ahead of time. Because if Ferrari sinks in internal crises so early in the season, the problem will not only be technical, it will be structural. Leclerc knows that land, he has lived it for years. Therefore, his phrase "was an isolated case" is less a description of reality, and more an attempt to project control in the middle of chaos. And yet, the question is open. Is it really an isolated case when all symptoms indicate otherwise? Hamilton has eloquently described it: a dice run. Each Brembo Pills game presents a different response, which forces the pilot to recalibrate his braking in each stint, in each lap. For someone who bases their pilot style on millimeter anticipation, losing that reference point is devastating. It's not just about going slower, it is about losing confidence in the most basic control tool of a F1 car. And if we talk about design, the SF25 has opted for a rear architecture that many consider radical. The adoption of a pull rod type suspension has displaced the cockpit backwards, compressed the gearbox housing, and limited the central shock absorber route. This, in theory, should provide greater aerodynamic efficiency, but in practice it has generated an extremely rigid and sensitive platform. It is a car that needs a perfect tuning range to work. Any deviation from that window, however small, makes Ferrari an unstable car, which punishes those who do not master it. It is here that the difference between Leclerc and Hamilton becomes evident. Charles has been developing this car for years with engineers. He knows how he behaves with each pressure change, how he responds to each balance correction. Its relationship with the SF25 is of forged complicity in years of frustrations, errors, and mutual learning. Hamilton, on the other hand, is trying to decode this language for the first time, in the middle of a calendar that does not give truce and with the pressure of justifying its star signing. To try to contain this technical chaos, Ferrari already works on a completely redesigned rear suspension. This radical update is expected to open the double adjustment margin in the car settings. It is an ambitious, almost desperate commitment, which seeks to return to the pilots that sense of control and predictability that today seems lost. But it is not just a matter of mechanics. It is a matter of trust. While Leclerc has learned to navigate the turbulence of the SF25, Hamilton is still looking for the mainland. And until Ferrari does not deliver a car that responds consistently, each curve will be a roulette, each race is unknown, and each result an emotional roller coaster. Hamilton arrived in Ferrari with the mission of closing his sports career at the top. He didn't come for money. It did not come for comfort. It came by legacy. And yet, after only a few races, it is already facing a paradoxical situation. The challenge is larger than I thought, and its margin of adaptation smaller than I believed. In Melbourne, his first contact in wetting with the SF25 was found stuck in traffic because of a bad strategy and a degradation of poorly managed tires. In China, he felt more comfortable, but even without that precision that characterized his best years. And in Hungary, the circuit where historically shone, suffered one of the worst performances of his career. However, the most revealing was not the result. It was his reaction. The comment that Ferrari should change the pilot could be read as an outburst, as a passing frustration, but also as a cry of discomfort, as a sign that something is not flowing inside the team. Hamilton is not used to failing, and much less to feel that it does not have control. This Ferrari for now not only requires adapting, it requires it to reinvent yourself. And this is where Charles Leclerc enters. His role is not simply teammate. He is the heir of Hope Tifosi, the house pilot, the man who has endured years of strategic errors, unstable cars, and painful defeats. His maturity, which at other times was questioned, has been revealed as one of the most valuable assets of the team. And in Hungary, he demonstrated not only on the track but out of it. Publicly defending Hamilton was an act of emotional intelligence. He knows that if Ferrari breaks internally, there is no technical evolution that can save the season. Both pilots need. But more importantly, the team needs them working as a unit. Because this season is outlined as one of the most competed in recent years. McLaren has started strongly. Red Bull, despite his internal turbulence and pilot changes, is still lethal in the hands of Verstappen. Ferrari cannot afford to lose the train. And not to do it, you must quickly solve a delicate equation. Find the balance between two piloting styles, two philosophies, and two completely different leaderships. Hope is not lost. The performance of the SF25 under certain conditions remains at the end. Leclerc has demonstrated it. Hamilton has left flashes. The work in the rear suspension promises to open a new phase of competitiveness. But none of that will make sense if the team does not first find internal harmony, a common language, an approach that allows both pilots to rise each other instead of limiting themselves. In Maranello, it is not enough to be fast. You have to be resistant, mentally indestructible, and emotionally committed to the project. Ferrari is not a car. It is an idea. And that idea, right now, needs more than aerodynamic updates. You need confidence. You need leadership. And you need time. But in Formula One, time is the most scarce resource of all. Charles Leclerc said that Hamilton in Hungary was an isolated case. One way to turn off a fire before it becomes a fire. And maybe he was right. Perhaps, in the brutal context of Formula One, where a bad free session can mortgage a whole weekend, which happened in Budapest was simply a punctual error. A sum of technical, strategic, and emotional factors that coincided in the less timely place and moment. But if this sport teaches us, it is that patterns are rarely casual. And what seems like an exception, often it is only the first chapter of a deeper story. Because when we look at the facts with magnifying glass, we see signs. A car that does not respond as it should. A pilot who still does not find his place. A team that, despite its advances, continues to drag non-healing wounds from the past. Hamilton's lack of trust in the brakes, his discomfort with the tuning, his public doubts. All of that is not erased with a single good classification or an eventual podium. Ferrari needs consistency, not just speed. And above all, you need internal cohesion. And yet there is hope. There is talent. There is a structure that, although imperfect, has learned to get up after each fall. There is a more mature Charles Leclerc than ever, willing to hold the team at critical moments. And there is a Lewis Hamilton that, despite its difficulties, is still one of the smartest and most resilient pilots of the grill. We saw it adapt in record time to a hostile car. We saw it absorb information, change your style, and still keep fighting. We saw him enjoy again. And when Hamilton enjoys, the rest should worry. What is happening in Ferrari this year is much more than a high-up narrative. It is a transformation. Painful, yes. Slow too. But perhaps necessary. Because in Formula One, champions teams are not built in a single season. They are forged in the conflict, in forced learning, in the moments when everything seems to go wrong and nobody still does. So now it's your turn. Was it really an isolated case as Leclerc says? Or are we facing a deeper problem that Ferrari still does not want to admit? Do you think Hamilton will adapt and return to the top with the rampant Cavallino? Or will Red Sleep become a repeated nightmare? Leave it in the comments.